running in to help us. And so thank you so much. Right now, I'm hoping you're seeing that same clip art that I created for you. The same clip art that I have created and put on all your emails and all the advertisements and that kind of thing, so that you know you're in the right place. And Jim has a great question. Am I going to record or archive this presentation? Absolutely. I try to always record those and save those for you, so that if you are busy, I know people have family obligations, and teachers, you know, between coaching and lesson planning and all that, sometimes you're listening to this on a lunch, you know, trying to fit it in. So I always try to record these. It usually takes me about a day or two to get the recording back out to you. And so, yeah, absolutely. So I'm hoping you have sound. If you have sound, can you please let me know by typing yes in there one more time, because I'm a little nervous there's no sound. I'm not seeing anything in the chat box here. Oh, you've got, Carlos has got the title screen. Excellent, excellent. So that's what I'm hoping to see. And do you hear me? So I'm really hopeful that you can hear me at this point. Hearing me twice. Jim, are you still hearing me twice? Because I know it was, unfortunately, in our troubleshooting, we did have it going on one screen at the other, you know, when the other one was recording. And so we were getting it twice. Glenda and Joe are saying they can hear me. That's wonderful feedback. Thank you. I apologize about the technology issue, which is so funny doing a webinar on technology. So let's go ahead and I would love to know just a little bit before we start. Have you used Desmos before? So have you used Desmos before? So if you could put in there yes, no, maybe a little, or you've been introduced to it. And I would love to hear where you guys are at in this whole thing. So I would love to know where you guys are at with Desmos as we're getting started here. Okay. Great. Thank you so much that you guys are responding so well and that you can hear me. Thank you. This is very, very, very helpful. So let's see. There we go. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is Desmos, and I am so excited to share this with you. If you attended my first webinar, you know, it was my first one, so I was nervous and I felt like I was talking too fast, and I always look forward to interacting with my audience. So one of the things I took away from that is definitely to ask you more questions. And so, yeah, and so I always look for your interaction. So I might pause from time to time and take a look at that chat box. It just makes me feel so much more connected to you. And I'm seeing that some of you have never seen it before. And Central Park was actually, Shenandoah, thank you for bringing that one up. That was actually one of the ones I was going to bring up. A lot of people don't realize that even if they've used Desmos before, that it actually has some pre-created resources for you. So I think you're going to walk away and you're going to say, I can use this in my classroom. I can use this in my classroom either on the whiteboard or even to make worksheets and things that help with that, or I can use Desmos every day with my students. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Oops. Went too far. So today we're in our webinar, we're going to talk about why Desmos. So why are we going to use this tool? And then obviously we're going to go over the basics. So if you have never seen this before, we are going to talk about all that good stuff that comes right in the very beginning. We're going to talk about using patterns and predictions to help our students understand how we can use Desmos with statistics. I think for Algebra 1 teachers, it's really hard to know exactly what in statistics is covered. And a lot of the Common Core standards, we're going to talk about this, say with technology. So we're going to go over some of those. And then quadratics, making predictions, writing the functions, giving 2 points. And of course, there's going to be other things that come up in here. I love this tool. This tool has really helped my students and myself in Algebra 1 with so many things. And then, of course, at the very end, we'll go over some teacher tips that will help you to understand a little better about how to use it and some things that'll make it a little bit easier to use. So why Desmos? Let's start there. Desmos is free because they have done a very smart thing. They have partnered with people with money so that they, as long as they supply their services to them, the donations there fund it for all teachers and anybody who wants to use it. I just noticed that Mary's having some issues, and Mary, I have a feeling that it'll catch up in just a minute and you will be all set. We had some technical issues in the beginning. So we also have the platforms and the availability. So I don't know what you are using, and I would love to hear, what are you using? Are you using Chromebooks? Are you using iPads? Is it BYOD? What kind of computers or technical or devices, I guess would be the correct word, do you use in your classrooms? The reason why I would love to know that is there are some little shortcuts here that will really help. The platforms that Desmos is available on and free for is pretty much everything. For your Chromebooks, you've got a Chromebook app. For your iPads, you have a free app. I love to use it on my phone. And so I have it right on my phone, and I can pull that out in a second. My students love to have it on their phone. It's kind of funny, just because it's their phone, they love to do math with that. And then, of course, it's free, and it works really well in Chrome and obviously Firefox and Internet Explorer, as well as with your Macs. The ease of use, I thought, was a huge thing for why Desmos. If you look at the screenshot I took right here, these are all of your tools. And so everything is very easy to see and around here. Yes, we've got Chromebooks and Androids and HP desktops, Windows 7 for credit recovery. Jim, we are going to be talking about how to use Desmos for those at-risk kids to save some time. And then Carlos asked, apps for Android and iOS. Yes. In the beginning, they talked about some problems with the Android. I have not run into any of those. I have not run into any problems. If you have a smart board, I have a smart board in my classroom. And I find this to be just an amazing tool. The kids love to get up and work with it, and I can ask them questions, and we'll get into some of that. The ease of use and the tools, and then it's super visual. So somebody brought up their credit recovery, and yeah, Mary's having some issues, and I'm wondering, can you let me know if you are seeing the screen? I'm on a screen that says Why Desmos at the top, and I would love to make sure that you're on the same page. I know we did have some technical difficulties in the beginning, but I think we have those resolved, but I want to make sure before we keep moving forward here. All right. Oh, it looks like people are catching up here. Okay, so Jim, you've got a tough group. We've talked before. Your juvenile facility, lots of credit recovery. Yes, visual, and we're going to talk a lot about that visualization. I think you're really going to like it. The basics. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into what Desmos looks like and how it works, how to graph a basic function, the keypad, and those special buttons that are all around the outside here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to click over to my internet. And when you go to desmos.com, and if you have a second device, feel free. Thank you so much, Erin, for letting me know. I was just checking to make sure everybody can see. So as we go into desmos.com, it always looks like this. on the front page. If you download one of the apps, and you'll notice the buttons are right there, we have the Apple app and the Google Play app. To go right in, we'll come back to some of the stuff that's right here because this is very, very exciting. But one thing at a time, when you hit Start Calculator, what you get is their basic screen. And we have accounts. And I did want to do this before I forget. I am not a lawyer by any means, obviously, math teacher by trade. But when you have students creating accounts, just to cover your own hiney, you may want to look at, are you allowed to have students create accounts? Like, is that in something that the parents sign off on? I was a consultant for a year, and I saw a huge hoopla. One parent got really upset and got a lot of parents upset that they were creating accounts with their students' names, because then their students' names and information was online. In this day and age, I understand the concern, but I just want to make sure you, as the teacher, are protected. You might just want to take a look at that, technology form and make sure they can create an account. But really, I've used it because it wasn't in our forms. I used it without students creating an account. Only I had an account, and it worked really, really well. So let's go ahead and get started. If you go to the left, we're going to talk more in detail here. They have pre-created graphs. I'm going to click on that and close it. You can save anything once you create an account. This is going to come in handy. We'll model that for you. This help button has tutorials and a user guide. And that user guide is phenomenal. They did a really nice job of sharing with you. If you teach ESL students, as I did, it was really helpful for some of my students were wonderful at mathematics and horrible at English because they had just moved here. They were, this was their first year. And so the languages provided here really gave a nice advantage. They didn't feel so overwhelmed. Our graph settings are very, very helpful. The one in Algebra 1 that I use the most is projector mode. And I'm going to turn that on so that you can see the video a little easier. What this does is highlights the lines, makes the equations on the left-hand side much, much larger so that they can see it. You can see that if you teach upper level, this could come in really handy. And then I always like to point this out. The zoom in and the zoom out is very helpful. So let's go ahead and graph our first equation. So I'm going to graph just something very simple. Y equals 3x plus 6. And you'll notice that this is graphed very, very well. And you can change the window. You can zoom in, depending on the detail you need for that story problem, that situation. And we can zoom out. As soon as I click underneath this equation, I'm able to graph a second. So let's say we are getting into some quadratics. So I'm doing the keyboard, but let's also use the keyboard they provide here. So I can do x squared, instantly get my quadratic, and let's translate that down a little bit, down 3. Okay, so now I have that equation. This comes in very handy. So now let's get into some of the keys that really make this a very, very powerful tool. So if I click this edit list, you'll see this little table here and also a duplicate button. The duplicate button is awesome when you're showing kids patterns. So if I was trying to explain to them what this -3 is, I can go ahead and I hit done. Now I've got a duplicate. But let's say I go ahead and change that, and it'll move it up. Now, the one thing I don't like is that the color is the same. If you're using one of the apps, you just click and hold on that. You just keep your finger on it if you're on an iPad or a phone, and you'll get the same options. I'm going to hit Edit List if I'm on some sort of PC or MacBook, and you click that blue, and now I can change the color so that I can keep track of it even better. As soon as you click underneath, you get another one. Now, this is really nice. Now, you can also find points by, if you can see my cursor going over here, if I click this intersection, it will show me the point. If I click the vertex, it will also show me that point. So you can see where systems of equations and seeing vertex form. This is all going to be super helpful for these basics, just how to get in here and graph it. I'm going to take a look here and make sure I haven't forgotten anything. We're going to talk about the sliders in just a minute, and so I'm going to go right back to our PowerPoint presentation here. And then zooming in and out. Kids get in the goofiest places on this thing sometimes. I'm sure some of you who've used it. Yeah, I was just seeing some of your notes there, some good insights. So as we are taking a look at these, the zoom, if you ever hit the home button, it takes you right back to the default window, which is really nice because kids will they'll get zooming in and out, not realizing they're hitting the mouse or something. And this brings them right back so that I'll say, everybody hit home, especially if I have it on the smart board and they're freaking out that theirs doesn't look like mine. And that's a great place to open up that conversation about how zoomed in you are, what's the domain, what's the range. And you might have noticed you can set the domain and range in these graph settings. So if I want to change, add a label and make sure, even take it off there, you can do that. So there are lots of ways to edit this. So if I zoom in, I can see these points even better. Now if I click and hold, I can see any of these points. So if the question is, what's the x-intercept, what's the y-intercept, those ones you can click on and it'll give it to you every time. But if you need one of those other points, let's say that story problem is talking about what happens, after 2 seconds, well, it's 1 meter high, you are able to answer that even when it's not on an intersection. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next point here, because I think you're going to enjoy more about how we use this within the lessons. So one of my favorite lessons is Shapes of Algebra. It's in the very first week on my website, and it talks about all these different equations, and I've got an example and a screenshot on the next page. But it uses absolute functions, and in Desmos, we call it restricted domains, but specifying a specific domain, and systems of equations can be used on Desmos, and inequalities and piecewise functions. And so often with so many of our students, we're giving so many standards to cover that it's simply not fair for the students. We used to get 1 through 50 in the textbook, and how many of you remember doing that? I'm sure I'm not the only one old enough here to have been given 1 to 50 even every night in Algebra 1. But the nice part about that is we had time to do that, and it was all in one skill. And that time was given in class as well with our teacher. Not always great. At-risk kids get bored with that, and a lot of kids nowadays, they want that instant gratification. But Desmos will allow us to actually see those patterns without taking so much time out of our classrooms. And so that is absolutely fabulous, where they can see the pattern of what's going on. So what I did is I created some simple translations, and I wanted to reiterate that what you can do is actually put the equations in on the left-hand side. If you log in and save it, like I did here, now I'll be able to, I put the link right in my presentation, just like you could share that with your students, depending on what you use. If you use something like Edmodo or Schoology or Schoology, however you're supposed to pronounce that, I've never gotten clarification on that, or whatever you use to share information with your students, you can actually create it, and then it will take the students. I'm going to open that up, hopefully, and I have already created all of these graphs for them. Okay, and so you don't have to waste time in your class. I've actually had students create these for me using my account, again, because we weren't allowed to have accounts. But this opens up so many awesome lesson ideas just by them being allowed to look at these. What you can also do with this plus sign is go ahead and hit this plus sign here, and you can create folders. We're going to talk about tables. You can even insert images right in here so that the kids have to, I used to do it where I insert an image and then ask them to write the equation to make it match. And so it kind of took it backwards for them, and they really liked doing that. They liked it. It felt like a puzzle to them. But the nice part about this folder is I can close it. So if I said, hey, here's the green one, what's the equation for that? And they were able to kind of work backwards, and then when we click the down arrow, they could check their work. So now one thing we haven't talked about, and I think this is absolutely fabulous for Desmos, is you'll notice the orange line here has what's called a slider. And so I can change the slope. And if I want to hide the other ones, I can simply click on it, and now they're gone. And I can put this away so that it's out of our way, but my lesson doesn't have to stop. So now what I've got is anytime you type this in with a variable, for example, the M or the B, it will give you the option to create sliders. And students can move it. So what are they going to notice here as I move it? What's actually getting bigger? The x-intercept or the y-intercept? And I was surprised how many of my students, even though they do this in 8th grade, would say the x-intercept instead of the y-intercept. Now let's go ahead and create one of these right here. So if I wanted to do this for another equation, let's say y equals a x, and I can click that squared button, or you can hit Shift-6 squared, and then let's put one more variable in here, plus b. It will actually add the slider for me so that I can. Now what's interesting is because I purposely did this, I put the same variable in for the b. And so as the variable, as that b changes, it will change it in both equations. But the sliders are really that easy to create. And so it opens up so many opportunities. Now the other thing before we move on to dealing with patterns that's really important. Yes, Taryn just said something very important, and I do apologize about the delay. I hope you understand there's not a hope that's the Google Hangout situation. Kimberly, they do not need to sign in to your account to get your equations. So let me show you. If I sign in here, and I apologize for the delay, but I just want to make sure you can see this. I think it's really a point that's important, because if you can't share it, it really loses a lot of the power. Okay, and that's what I get for using my husband's computer. The keyboard is smaller. All right, and so I'm signed in now. You'll notice I get these green buttons right here in the upper right-hand corner. If I wanted just to print this, it would give me a nice little image that I can print. But if I want to share this graph, I can actually I can email it, I can embed it, or I can give them this link. And this link I could send to you right now. I'm honestly watching the, there we go. I'm watching the chat on a different computer. Otherwise, I put it right in there, and you guys could look at it right this very second from here. And so it works really, really well. When people get that link, anybody in the world could go to it, use what you've created, and it will not change what you've got. And when people use that link, they always go back to the original, which makes it so fabulous for sharing with your whole class. So when one kid plays with it, they do not mess it up for the whole rest of the class. Everybody gets a fresh sheet, and they can then save it if they have accounts, which we've talked about. I understand that. Or they could actually just email you a link, okay, of that and show you their work. A lot of devices nowadays have screenshots. So I've seen a lot of teachers, they'll have the screenshot, and that's what they share with their teacher if they want to hold them accountable, depending on how your class works there. And we don't need this one for staff picks, I don't think. You will see that there are some amazing, amazing things in here that they could share. So let's go back over to our PowerPoint. Make sure I haven't forgot to share something with you. We talked about saving time, using that duplicate key and looking for patterns and that repetition that kids need without putting in all that time. So the Shapes of Algebra is like a free download on the website. It's under Unit 1, Week 1. It's under, I believe, Day 4 or Day 5. And it has them compare it. And if you're in the members area, I have created one where it's got an answer key. I don't like to put answer keys out for kids to find because they do find them. They are sneaky. But I put the answer key in the members area as well as a worksheet that's got the graphs and table area for tables. And I think that could be good to get them started depending on where you're at. But then they can type in the rest of these very, very quickly and move through it. We've got absolute value functions. I knew with us spending so much time on the other stuff, I just did a screenshot of this one. Yes, and so I took a screenshot of this one just to save time so we can move through. But the absolute value buttons are right down in that keyboard, and they work very, very well. And I see Luann's got to leave. I understand the bad battery there. Jody, it is very similar to GeoGebra. The difference between GeoGebra and Desmos is that Desmos is so much easier to use. And so for some of my students, I was having a really hard time with GeoGebra because all the buttons are there. Now, Desmos does do a lot of, if I pull up the keyboard, Desmos does do a lot of the functions that GeoGebra does. It's got the trig and the stats and all sorts of other things as well. But it's not as involved, but it does do a lot of things that the Algebra 1 classroom would need. But yes, I love GeoGebra. I used it a long time before I ever learned about Desmos. I just noticed that Desmos does a lot of great stuff, and it was easier for my students to master. So I felt like I was teaching less the program and more the mathematical content, if that makes sense. Where before I felt like I was teaching so much GeoGebra and the technology that my students were missing out on time that we really just didn't have. And back when I made that decision, we were on trimesters. And I know some of you have to teach all of Algebra 1 in one semester on block scheduling. So, you know, that time gets really, really precious to use. The other thing that we can do is restricted domains. And I love that you can put domains in here and add that notation in there for the functions. So this image that I copied and pasted it in here for you is created all using GeoGebra. They obviously took out the grid using those tools, but let's take a look real quick. If I am, let's go ahead, and anytime you want to start a new one, you click up here and do new blank graph. And what I can do here is, let's do y equals 4x. And I want to restrict that domain. All I have to do, is use these and say x, let's say less than 0. And now I've got it so that I've got that graph, but I've been able to restrict the domain. The nice part is if I do y equals, I was just noticing Kate's question, and I love that question. Absolutely, I do not think this should replace paper and pencil. Absolutely not. I think the kids absolutely have to understand where those numbers come from, where the table comes from. But in the same breath, when you're wanting them to see the patterns and when you are wanting them to understand, let's say, how this 2 is interacting with everything, I just think that's so powerful that they can look at a bunch of them all at once and be able to make the predictions on their own without it. But I absolutely think there's quality and value in understanding algebra by graphing it good old school hand and the number sense and everything? I think that is such a great question, Kate. And I think if other people have something to chime in there, please feel free to do that. That is such a hard balance, though. I think that is just such a hard balance to have. Now, one thing that we didn't go over talking about tables and Kate's question is if I hit this edit list, I'm going to try to be repetitive so you get real comfortable with these menus. I can hit table. It will actually take it and convert it to a table. Now, the nice part is when it converts it to a table, it will show you these points so that you have the points of intersection. So one thing that I've done before is I've had them graph it on paper, and then I've had them put it into Desmos to kind of check their work and see that. And so that is absolutely fabulous. Yes, and I'm just seeing Ellen's remark. GeoGebra, I think, is better for some geometry topics because of the things that have actually been created. The creation of it has just been phenomenal. So you can, now the problem with changing it to a table, and if anybody knows how to do this, I have searched and searched the last couple of days because I'm like, there's got to be a way. I know how to change it to a table, and I do not know how to change it back other than using the infamous, if you ever make a mistake online, you hit Control Z and it will undo your last action. But I have not found a way that once I go ahead and hit the edit list and change it to a table to get it to go back. And that drives me crazy. And then remember, if we want to change the color, we can hit edit list and I can click on it there and we are able to change that. And then go ahead and hit done. So these are some of those things that are little, but when you're trying to teach a class and you've got all three graphs are green, and that's it. And I'm noticing Taryn's question, just start a curly braces and then type the inequality for the restriction. Thank you so much for answering Geraldine's question. I really appreciate you guys helping each other out there. That's really helpful. There are a couple different ways to doing a lot of these things, and I just wanted to do, just wanted to make sure that you guys see the basics. If I start giving you guys every way there is to do something, I think it would be a little overwhelming in the beginning, but I'll give you some resources to take a look at some other ways as well. So I wanted to make sure that we made, that we were covering those, you know, Algebra 1 Common Core standards. So, you know, the IFB5 is relating the domain of a function to its graph. So sometimes I would have students, I would say, you know, we would talk about the equation for a story problem, and they wouldn't give me the domain, and I would make them do those brackets to help them get used to, first of all, identifying the domain. And the other thing is you can also do the range. So, and that is fabulous for helping out with that. So I would have them take a look at that story problem, and then they'd have the right equation, you know, that smarty pants that's always the first one done. And you love them, but there's something about them being always not challenged, and it drives me crazy because I worry they're not going to grow like I want every kid to grow every day. That's always my saying, every kid grows every day. So I'll take it one step further. Well, what could you make the domain? What could you make the range? Is there a way you can do that? And so being able to ask those questions and just knowing that that exists, setting the domain and range is really, really helpful. Now I'm super excited to get into some statistics. I got to get a drink of water here, because I don't know if you can hear my kiddos in the background, but they're being really good back there, Ben. But I'm worried you guys can hear them through the mic. But they're being good. I promise they're not hurt or anything. Let's take a break before we jump into statistics. I want to see what you guys are writing here in the forum and the chat box. Mary, I love your comment here. I think Desmos is a good teaching tool, good exploration tool, and a good way to introduce the idea of a graphing calculator. Me too. The simplicity and then what it can be expanded to, so students can really concentrate on what they're learning. Kevin, I'm not sure. I will take a look at that though, an undo and a redo. Yeah, because the undo works, so I'm sure there's something there somewhere. It was really frustrating to me that I could change it to a table and could not change it back. Ellen, I love the sliders comment. I think the sliders are so important so that you can vary one thing while everything else stays the same, like a controlled experiment. And then students can see how the graph changes based on the change in that one variable on the slider. And then Ellen, I'm so glad you brought that up because I'm going to open a new graph. And I wanted to show you that you don't have to have this solved for y. So if I something like this, how many times do our students have a hard time? They learn y equals mx plus b, and then we put it in standard form, and they kind of get a little confused about how the a and the b is going to change the graph. So now the sliders, just like you said, having that controlled experiment, how it changes, now they can change just the a or just the b. And this has been really cool for the kids to put together some of those concepts. Right, Mary, I couldn't agree with you. They will learn how to graph by hand faster. Just think about when you go to play with this program, because you've seen it before, how much easier is it going to be to click the tools and play around with it than if you'd never seen it before. It's almost like, where do I start and where do I go? This gives them kind of that roadmap to what it should look like and how they work. And it really does speed up that learning. Jody, I like your question. Do you teach Desmos first and then have them use a graphing calculator? Are too many tools confusing? I don't think so. I think our kiddos are pretty amazing at picking all of this up. And if you help them make the connections, hey, in this one, we set the domain and range this way. And this is the same thing, but we do it this way. If you help them make those connections, I don't think it's too many tools. I think if we don't slow down and help them understand those connections and the pros and cons of each, then it gets really confusing for them. I think when we slow down and just take a breath and help them connect it, they're saying kids nowadays, because of the instant gratification, they really have a harder time making those connections. And I would agree that I've seen that over the last 17, 18 years. It seems like kids used to be able to come up with that stuff on their own. And I would hear them talking to each other. See, that's just the same thing as this. And I don't feel like I hear that kind of conversation out of students anymore. And I love Mary's idea for using it, and I do this a lot. Yes, over time I have kids graph in class or at home, and then they check it on Desmos, and then they know they've got it right. And how many kids just want to know they've got it right before they try one more problem? Yes, and Kimberly, you stole my thunder on that comment. Absolutely. I actually put in my notes, don't forget to talk about literal equations, because yes, they can take a literal equation, graph it, convert it, and then see if it's the same. And you know what's funny is when I did that last year, most of them were just missing a negative. And isn't that what we always know, that they mess up anyway? But they got to figure it out without me having to figure out. Yes, Kevin, I love that. Have them making pictures, allowing them to be creative, using domain, range, inequalities. It's just so powerful. When you give kids choice and power, it's amazing what they will do. When it gets to be that February slump, and I'm in Michigan, so we do get the February slump. It's pretty amazing how I can pull out 3 assignments and they're all the same basically, but I say, you can pick one, and they get to pick, and I make them look different, but you know how it is. We played a game and it's all the same thing, but I'll get more kids turn that in than I do when I don't give a choice. It's really quite cool. I'm looking at Taryn's. She says, I do something similar with the systems, and REI 5, which asks to prove that you can replace an equation with the sum and multiply to verify they still get the correct solution. Isn't that powerful when they can see it visually something that they've done so algebraically. And I think that's really powerful. We're going to get into some of that a little more detail here. You guys have such great thoughts that I got to get myself back on track here. So we've got statistics and we've got our scatter plots. So scatter plots, putting data into a table is easy in Desmos. You certainly may do that. And then you're able to get the regression and the correlation coefficients, which we know is one of the newer Algebra 1 standards. So let's go back in here. No, I don't want to quit. So let's go ahead and, whoops. There we go. Get a new blank graph. And anytime you want to insert a table or have kids put in a table, we just add a table. And what's nice is they can go ahead and insert information and see that scatter plot. Let's pick some numbers that are showing here without fussing with the window. I think we're all big enough to see the window here. And so we've got our scatter plot here. But what we can do, so here's my points. If I click below it, you can do the regression for it right here in Desmos. Now, this is relatively new. There's a little, and I just blanked on the name of it, of course, because I'm on the webinar. But if I type in Y1, because that's the title, let's scroll back up here. I'm going to hide the keyboard here. So but it says Y1 here. If I put another table in, it'll be Y2. You don't have to do anything to get the subscript. It'll automatically go in there. But instead of the equal sign, you're going to use, and I'm totally blanking here, because I'm on the spot, I guess. And this looks like, let's change that 10 just so we can get some decent data. Let's put in another 4. And let's see where we got here. That'll be good. And so we do mx1, because that's the title, plus b. And what it will give you is your correlation coefficient, your R value. This one is horrible. They're off quite a bit. And if you wanted it to plot the residuals, if you're getting more involved, they are right there. And so you are able to get your correlation coefficient right here from the data, which I think is really cool. Oh, awesome, Kevin. Thank you for checking that. I am loving it. You're helping me out here. So what he was able to look up is the arrows do work for the undo and redo. It is between the delete, all and done above the table, which is perfect. Okay, so I'm going to start a brand new one because I did get some data here. Let's go back into my Google here. And so if I were to start a brand new graph, what's nice is I've got this information, and this was released by the infamous Dan Meyer, I'm so sorry, Dan Meyer, and I am a huge fan of his, and he released this. This is his infamous basketball problem. So I'm going to copy this information. This is the X position of where the basketball is compared to the height off the ground. And so the nice part is I highlight it and I copy it and I just right click in here, or I'm sorry, and whoa, now I tried this 3 times. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. There we go. Control V. Borrow my husband's computer because the sound works better on his than on mine. And you'll see that it plots it automatically. Now, where I use this in my lesson plan is I love to have the kids figure out, well, which one gives me the better correlation coefficient? Is this exponential? Because I do have students who will want to draw the line straight through it, and you can see where they could do that. And I try to be very, very forgiving and let them figure it out themselves. So I do my Y1, got my little X1 plus B, and you can see the straight line's pretty good right through there. I am going to cross that out there so we can see. And our R value and our correlation coefficient's 0.9. It's quite high. And so that looks pretty darn good. But now let's go ahead and try it with a quadratic. Okay, and so if I do it with a quadratic, we have, I can do y1, and we'll do a x minus 5. I forgot what variables they use, but either way, as long as we've got our, now if I pull up the keyboard, my shortcut, remember I've got my squared button there. I know we've got some brand new beginners, so I should be using it plus B. What did I mix up there? Oh, what I forgot was the 1. There we go. So it's always something simple when I slow down to take a look at it. So now we've got our quadratic, and you'll see that my correlation coefficient is 1. So while the students were correct, that orange line is darn close to where we want it. It's not in the correlation coefficient is 0.9. We could do even better with a quadratic. And I think that once we talk about that, they do always understand it. Okay, does data have to be in Excel format first to cut and paste? Excellent question, Kimberly. I did try putting the data into our PowerPoint presentation and copying and pasting it from there to work on it. And I've got it here. And I tried to copy and paste it out of this, and it did not work. So then I went back and I tried it out of Google, their documents, their data, and out of the Google Doc, it did work. Out of Excel, it did work. So I'm not sure where that cutoff is, and I was trying to play with it. I was finding that in the presentation, if it gave me the table, I tried it in the notebook software. I know a lot of you said the smartboard, so I want to make sure to talk about that. Is on the smartboard, if I copied and pasted it out of that table, it did not work. Now, I don't know if there's something I'm doing a little goofy there. You may want to try it. But when I did it out of Google or I did it Excel, it worked great. So that's my best answer for right now. I would love to see if that's device or browser sensitive, because I have run into some of those as well. Yes, and Taryn, you can absolutely add a table and type it in yourself. So depending on where you're getting the data, oops. Depending on where we're getting this data from, at any time I can hit that plus sign, hit the table, and I'm able to type that in myself. And so, thank you, Ellen. Good heavens. Google Spreadsheets, thank you. You could hear me stuttering over my words. Thank you, I appreciate that. Right, Kevin, the equations have to be typed in quite a bit differently the more complex they are. I did try it with quadratics and it worked just fine. And I did try it with the absolute values and it worked just fine. But I did read that, you know, beyond Algebra 1, you're probably going to run into some issues with the domain and range. Absolutely. Oh, and it is already 7:50. My first one, I was so used to everybody, you know, dealing with my classroom and talking to the students and everything. I didn't plan enough material, and this one I may have planned too much. So let's head back over here to our PowerPoint. Let's go backwards just 1 second. It does ask us in the Common Core to compute and interpret the correlation coefficient of a linear fit. And I like to take that one step further because we are expected for students to be able to identify linear to quadratic to exponential. And with Desmos, it makes it so simple for them to take a look at and compare those that I do ask my students to do it, and they did it very well. And as you know, if you've heard me talk at all, I do have a lot of high risk, at-risk, poverty-prone students. With quadratics, I love to use quadratics with Desmos, so that they understand that the zeros are where they hit the x-intercept. And when I am able to do that, when I have them solve it whether that's solving it, you know, using square roots or solving it using the quadratic formula, or however I'm having them solve the quadratic, then they can go ahead and graph it and they can actually see those zeros. And it's so good because I have so many students that I'm teaching Algebra 1 to that are missing so many of those pre-algebra skills. It allows them, because Desmos gives it to them as a decimal. And we, you know, we sometimes calculate it out as a fraction, or I make them simplify the radical, and they have to understand the connection between those numbers. And that was just an added bonus of working with Desmos and doing it on paper. And then writing the quadratic function given 2 points. There is a cool activity, and I wanted to take this time to show the quadratics. And then this standard also, as we go through the quadratics, I love this because it gave us a list of the vocabulary that's used on the assessments. So I think we understand that we need to know the key features, but a lot of textbooks use different key feature vocabulary, but this one lists it all out for us. So I always kind of keep this handy, and that way I remember to ask about end behavior. End behavior is not something that my textbook stressed when I was teaching out of it. So this just helped me to remember to talk about that. When you go to Desmos, and I'm going to open up a new window and go right into Desmos here. Oops. At home screen that I said we'd come back to, if you have a account or you set up an account, there are fabulous, fabulous classroom activities. So if I click the classroom activities, Central Park was brought up earlier. What a great program, and what it really makes kids think about how they're thinking. Think about how they're thinking, if that makes sense. But it makes them justify with numbers, using numbers, how they're doing it. I'm just taking a look at Elizabeth's comment. Yeah, one variable in domain or range has to limit the other. Just a fabulous comment there. You might want to take a look at that. But these, let's see all. That's what I'm looking for. I noticed they updated their site since this morning to this afternoon. And so I was like, wait a minute. The members area looked a little different from when I did some screenshots. So I didn't want to show you those, but isn't that how it goes? Here's one that we talked about, limiting the domain and range to be able to draw pictures so that they can draw with graphs. This one they do a great job. But also we've got the quadratics. These are wonderful activities that you can use with your students, and I love that they aligned them with the Common Core. Now the nice part is, again, they don't need their own accounts. When I go to Central Park, if I were to log in and I'm in a different window and I don't want to waste your time, what it does is just gives a number, and the students will go to student.desmos.com. And if you have something open there, you can just go to student.desmos.com. You'll see a real student-friendly page, and all they do is ask for that number, and they start the activity. And it's just really a fabulous, fabulous set of activities. So when we go to the quadratics, there's a couple things I really wanted to show you. This drop-down arrow where I've been getting all the blank things, you can see that they've already created all of these graphs for you. You're really going to want to go ahead and take a look at those graphs, because they're going to save you a ton of time, and the students have access to them as well. The ones for Algebra 1 here are probably the top 5 or 6, but then if you scroll down, there is a couple for statistics, and the linear regression one is very good to use as well. It does have kind of a lesson with it. So let's go back up to the parabolas here. And if I look at the parabolas in vertex form, if this is what I want to look for, I can open that graph. Now again, Desmos is just so powerful. I feel like I'm being repetitive, but where they can take a look at only one variable at a time, and make predictions. And we know if we don't tell them how to do this, they do so much better. I like using this for them to tell me, when do you get one solution? When do you get 0 solutions? When do you get infinite solutions? And when they use this, they really start to understand, well, this doesn't cross the x-axis. And they're able to look at those numbers and understand when that is. You can put these in, remember, in other formats. So they're able to look at when A, B, and C are certain numbers, what goes on there as well. So it's just a very, very powerful, powerful program. I hope you have found some good things you can use, the domain, the range, the function notation, and helping kids see it visually when they're ready to move into this. So some teacher tips, just like we inserted a table, you can put a picture right in here. We talked about that projector mode. I would suggest always using that when you're displaying it. A lot of smartboard users on the chat boards today. Create that account so that you can create those own lessons and graphs and send them out to your students. You can have files and folders where you hide things. And don't forget that they've got pre-made activities. And what I'm learning is just because it's not on the Desmos website doesn't mean it doesn't work. So, or isn't there. If you search in Google Desmos systems of equations, you're probably going to find one of those links where you can go in, share it with your students, and it's all set up for you as well. And that is just very, very helpful. So why'd you come to this webinar? I hope you got what you were looking for. I hope you found some ways to engage your students, to help them understand the math and use the technology. I know some of you are here just because somebody's told you you have to use the technology in your classroom, or you have to do your technology days once a month, or you have to, you know, there's so many have-tos nowadays. I hope this helps make your life easier and helps engage your students a lot. I hope you found some tips and lesson plans and ways to use this for Algebra 1. And I really hope that this is very, very helpful to you. If you're interested in joining us, you know, further, we do have a members area. We do have a back to school special going right now, and that back to school special is ending on Wednesday, and it does give you $100 off the yearly plan. And so if you are interested in that, go ahead and click that yellow button and it'll show you around the members area. We are updating that. It is pretty new, and it is so I am taking input and changing it every day and making it better, and I'm super excited about it. So if you wanted to look at that, you could join us just for a month and for $10, and we would love to have you. And you know, I'm just really excited about that. We've got almost 100 people in there now, and we're going to really get those forums kicking here. I've got some emails that will be going out this week and next week, and so I'm just really excited. If you would like to join us in the members area, we would certainly love to have you. And I can't say thank you enough. I know that your time is so valuable, and I'm seeing the clock tick to 8 o'clock, and I want to make sure that I respect your time. But if you ever have questions, please feel free to drop me an email. My email address is at the top of every page of the website, and so please, please take a look. And you are so very welcome. Everybody who's saying thank you right now, I don't want to miss anybody. Thank you, thank you. I hope you got lots of good tips, and Molly, I agree. I think it is better than GeoGebra. So I hope I said your name right. I apologizing. And then remember, I will send out, I do send out replays. So there will be a replay sent to you, because I know sometimes, where did she say that one button was or that one tool was? That can be frustrating. And so I will send out a replay along with some tools that we can use that might help you to get more associated with that. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll stick around the forum here, or the chat box here, for a couple more minutes. And if you guys have questions, please feel free to put them in the box. I did see Integrated Math 1. I don't yet. I've been asked a lot about Algebra 2 and Integrated Math. I'm really putting my focus on really building a very, very strong Algebra 1 community, and I want to serve those teachers really, really well before I go and and go anywhere else. And then, wow, Jody, thank you so much. That's such a compliment. I am trying to do a webinar a week so that I feel more comfortable and I get better at presenting these. I feel like every time you do something, you get better and there's more practice. But I also want to share this with you folks. And so, Jody, I was looking at next week, I was going to put out a survey tomorrow to the members and allow the members of the community to choose. So we were talking about I've had some people talk about engagement and getting students engaged in class, some of the motivation things. I did do one in the past about interactive notebooks. I felt like because it was my first one, I sounded really sketchy, but you know, it's there and I can send you the replay if you'd like to see that. And then we also talked about some more of the technology tools because people are really being pushed into that, whether or not they're ready. And so just to have something like this is very helpful. And then I've also been asked about doing some webinars on individual units that aren't as comfortable. So, you know, the statistics one has been one that has really come up. And then how to expand, you know, linear equations, because it seems like so much of what we taught in Algebra 1 is now taught in 8th grade. So how to expand those units, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, to cover some of those skills that we traditionally as Algebra 1 teachers have not yet taught. And so, yep, I'll be coming out with, I'll probably announce it Wednesday and we'll do it early next week. I'll be switching the time around just so that more people can be accommodated, especially I heard from a lot of people in the Pacific that they would love for it to be a little bit later. So yeah, we're planning another one. Well, thank you so, so much. And I will be sure to send a link to that then. If you'd love to see the interactive notebooks presentation, I am warning you, the first one always feels a little rough. Yeah, you know what, Mary, that's a great idea, you know, to take Desmos to the next level, because there is a whole way to actually create your own lessons in there. And it is, you know, it really is amazing how much it does. I was trying to fit everything into 1 hour. So, you know, Mary, that might be a really good option. I'll put that out to the community as well tomorrow. Thank you so much for suggesting it. And you are so very welcome. I'm so glad so many people were able to make it. And, you know, I felt like it was short notice, but the next one will have a little bit more notice. So I hope that will. All right, Kevin, I'll make sure when I send the replay for this one, I'll make sure that I send the other one as well. And if anybody on here is members, the webinars always go into the members area so that when you become a member, you have access to every, you know, every webinar. And Kimberly, thank you so much. That's so kind. If you would like to be notified of other webinars, you know, just make sure you've registered and I'll make sure that you get notified, you know, and if you ever don't want to be notified, all you have to do is simply register. Yes, Mary, I will send out a link for the replay for both this one and the one on interactive notebooks as well. So yeah, I'll make sure you get both of those. That is no problem at all. It usually takes about a day to get my video together. And then I like to write an email and make sure to add some additional resources. I just think it's fun when people like a resource. It's nice to have a next step ready. So I'll have that ready by tomorrow morning. Yeah, so I'm excited to have that out for you. Thanks so much. And if you're interested in joining us, we would love to have you. Have a great evening. Thank you.